Yes. Hello, everybody. This is Brad Swift with Gaia's Call, and this is Gaia's Call 2.0 because, as you can see, I have my co-host here, Marla of the Eco Chapter. And because we mentioned in our previous episode this thing called well, it goes by a couple different names. You think of it as a meta crisis or the polycrisis. I use those words kind of interchangeably, but that's what we want to talk about today. So, Marla, what are your thoughts about, well, where do we want to start? Maybe what would you define the polycrisis or meta crisis to be, and why are we talking about it here on Gaia's Call?
Yeah, well, first of all, hello everybody again. Thanks for having us back. Yeah, the polycrisis, we mentioned it last week, and really, to me, it's those two words, right? Poly meaning many, and crisis meaning many, many crises. Um, and unfortunately, this is happening all at the same time. Like a lot of people talk about the climate crisis or the plastic crisis, the ecological crisis, but the scary thing is that they're all happening concurrently, and the sum of their interactions is actually more scary than each of them individually. And so that's why we decided that we wanted to explain what we mean by this and of course get your thoughts at the end of of the session.
And we should also include in this that we are experiencing technological challenges well beyond our control and our expertise. So if we tend to have our words and our facial expressions not be a match, just don't look, just
Or if,
listen.
if my light suddenly disappears and goes off, like,
Right. Well, yeah, it's given us our opportunity to practice perseverance in the face of the polycrisis.
crises. Yes.
So, and the other thing I wanted to kind of address in this area, the polycrisis, is it can be. I think it's unavoidable that it's a bit of a downer conversation. We're talking about some major challenges of humanity. The climate crisis being just one of them. And at the same time, I think I speak for both of us. We're committed to having it also be something that inspires us as humanity, individually and collectively, into action to minimize the disruptions itself. That doesn't say that we're not going to have some, fairly significant, maybe major changes in our lifestyles, but how can we prepare for it rather than, um, keeping our heads in the sand itself? So the polycrisis is often framed as a symptom of deeper underlying systemic flaws in our global system rather than as a primary illness itself. So we're talking about systems that have been going on in many cases more than decades, hundreds of years, that simply are not functional or conducive to life itself. In
Yeah.
the work that
I
I
just
do,
wanted to jump
yeah,
into the symptom part. Like
yes, please.
I think this is something that many people don't realize, like because what's been kind of publicized in the media and things like that is that this is a climate crisis or this is a plastic crisis, and then people try and fix that crisis without looking at the root causes, like what you said with this idea of a symptom, right? The root causes that are causing the climate crisis or the plastic crisis in the first place. So, for example, with the plastic crisis, it's the fact that we have single-use plastic, we have pollution, all the emissions that are being given out, emitted with how we make plastic. But then it's also the whole idea of a root cause of consumer behavior, right? So if we didn't have that kind of consumer behavior where we thought we could consume and extract everything at will, then we probably wouldn't have the plastic crisis. So I just wanted to add, like when you talked about symptom, that this is something that very few people bring up in conversation. They always want to fix the crisis at like putting a band-aid over this huge thing that actually has roots going way, 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 way deeper. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, to play off of that, it's not just our actions, but even going further back. So, if we look at the climate crisis, that's kind of the results of something. It's a results of a certain set of actions we collectively have been taking for, in many cases, hundreds of years. But my approach is we need to go back even further. What are the misbeliefs, or as I call them, the great untruths that we have bought into? In many cases, particularly in our generations, whether it's my generation or Marla's generation, we were literally born into a culture that believed these. This was these great untruths have been kind of the water that we've been swimming in, and now we're starting to start to look around and say, well, what is this water? What are these great untruths? And certainly one of them is this whole notion that more is always better. And also that we've been living as though the earth resources are unlimited. Both of those are not true, but we've been living as though they're true. And maybe even the deepest one is the whole notion that we are not part of nature, that we are disconnected or separate from nature as well as being separate from each other. And so these three great untruths have been shaping our decisions, our choices, and our actions. And those decision choices of actions have led to the climate crisis and the other aspects that make up the polycrisis. So, what are your thoughts on that, Marla? To pass it back over to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's quite scary because if you think about where all these untruths came from, they're very much from like primal fears of like hostility, right? We are worried that someone's going to come and take stuff from us or treat us badly because like I guess we grew up in ancestors grew up with saber-toothed tigers and cavemen trying to beat them up and steal their food, and there was always something bad happening. There was like meteorites or the ice age or massive fires. So it was always running from something. And so we have this fear of hostility. And so we want to be a part of a community then that takes care of us and that is more powerful than the other one. And so we want to kind of have those kinds of leaders that are like all powerful, omnipotent. And then it's also the whole fear of like rejection. We're worried that we're going to be left out. I think now there's this whole thing called FOMO, like we want to do everything and get everything. And on top of that, it's like we hoard things, right? When we were, I guess, cavemen, we didn't have any fridges. We had no way to store things. So it was like get it while it's hot, get everything you can. And we're still doing that now, even though we really don't need to. And then of course another one is a fear of scarcity. So it's like we're always worried that we're not going to have enough. So we want to be safe in terms of we don't want things to happen to us. We want to conform. We don't want to be left out on our own because we want to be a part of a bigger picture and we want to have enough. Like we don't believe in abundance. We always think that we need more and more and more and it never stops. And then of course we have problems like plastic pollution and ecological crisis, biodiversity loss because we're just taking too much from this finite planet,
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
And I think again, it kind of look more deeply into that part of it, especially we've been, I guess it's been well over 100 years ago now that, at some point we discovered this thing called petroleum, and fossil fuels, coal, etc. And it was great. It really what made the Industrial Revolution possible, and a lot of great things came out of it. But what we didn't realize at the time is that we were literally using up our savings account.
Yeah.
So it's like going through your life, I can't remember where it was. It may have been in Jeremy Lent's book that I've been rereading. He was talking about imagine you inherited a large sum of money, but you only could get a certain percentage of that. And you didn't like that. You wanted to have access to all of it. So you finagled around to get access to all of it, not realizing that you were using up the reserves.
Yeah.
And if you continue to use up the reserves, sooner or later, those reserves run out, and then you're in a fix. And
Yeah.
we're in that fix right now.
Yeah, and I guess it's also because people don't think about where these things are coming from. I mean, our fossil fuels were the animals that d disappeared into the waters, in the what Carboniferous era, and our coal is the ferns and the trees that were on the land. And these are definitely finite resources because they were a part of time that, where all these animals died, and then they just became the fuels that we're using today, and that's why we call them fossil fuels. And all of these things were nature's gifts to us, like they're free natural capital that we've been sucking out of the earth and then, charging people lots of money to use. And that's really like, I think it's also the lack of understanding of where are these things coming from. It's just this magical well of never-ending presence or this inheritance, right? Like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you consider that it literally takes hundreds of thousands of years to produce those resources, how quickly are we using them up? In the matter of 150, 200 years, we're definitely getting close to, if we're not already at that area of what we call peak oil. In other words, there's going to be less and less of it, and there still will be more, and be more tapped out, but it becomes much more hard, difficult to, and becomes much more expensive to, and therefore this idea of cheap, energy sources become less and less. And meanwhile, as I wake up every morning and say good morning and do a sun salutation to the sun, we've got a resource that bombards us every day with more energy than we could possibly use in a year, pretty much ignoring it. I mean, it's not like we're not doing some things in the area of tapping into that energy source, but not nearly like the energy and effort that we're putting in towards using up our savings account of the fossil fuels itself. So, where do we go from here with that?
Yeah, I guess it's really an understanding of we have limited resources and we're almost stealing resources from the next generations because we're using it up way, way faster than they can be replaced. And also to think about like what you said with the sun. I mean, ultimately, solar energy just gives people another excuse to use more, right? It's then going back to the root causes of why do we need to use so much electricity? Why don't we save more? Why don't we spend more time in daylight hours? I mean, I'm saying this, it's like 11 p.m. at night and I'm on the computer with the light on. But these are things that we used to do, before the whole Industrial Revolution, where we used to wake up with the sun and go to sleep with the moon. So then, of course, you don't have to use that much electricity, whether it's from the sun or from dinosaurs. So yeah, I think it's really the understanding of these things are limited. We don't need to use as much as we're using, and they're gifts that we're really just taking advantage of.
Yeah. So the other piece I want us to kind of account for is these are difficult conversations to have. I know for myself, um, you can go a couple different directions with it. You can say, okay, that's beyond my control, can't do anything about it, so I'm going to ignore it. Or the other is to go into eco anxiety or eco depression, which also, both of which tends to keep us from taking action. I think what we would encourage is to deal with it, to look at it straight on, and then look to see what actions you could take. And again, it doesn't have to be at a podcast, and it can simply be simple things that you can start to do, and to make more people aware of the situation that we're in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel helpless because they also wait for somebody else to fix it. Some people are waiting for this technocratic savior to come and save us from ourselves. Some people are pointing fingers and saying the government has to do it or the corporations have to do it. or the scientists have to do it. But for me, I mean, personally, I felt really yeah, helpless when someone else is trying to fix everything, and I have no control of that. So it's really like, how do you empower yourself to be able to do something, whether it's big or small, it's still your life. You know, at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And so I think like between me and Brad, we're both also working on how do we tell people about small bits of empowerment. You know, like I think a lot of people just say, oh, it's too small, it's not going to do anything. But it might not do anything for the ecological crisis, but it might do a lot for you. I know for me, this definitely gets me through my day a lot
Yeah.
happier and hopeful because I know if I'm doing something, we're 8 billion people who could all be doing some little thing somewhere to kind of work on this crisis together rather than just point fingers and wait for somebody else to do it for us. So for me, like it's very much the work that I'm doing at the Eco Chapter. So it's around like education and also writing books about hope, very much focusing on better future narratives that are decoupled from like financial wealth and material goods. You know, how can we just find happiness in every day in nature and going outside and spending time with family and friends and things like that. And I think then Brad, you want to talk about your one cause and things like that as well.
Yeah. I, for me, it's that old saying, think globally and act locally. For me, it's both. You know, this podcast and my Substack and the things that I'm doing online like that is my global outreach, trying to reach anybody, anybody who's maybe just at that point where they're ready to be awakened to what we're in the midst of and how to navigate through it. And again, for me particularly, I want to reach eco-conscious families who have young children anywhere from 10 to 18 years of age who can we can start to bring them up into a new paradigm of thinking. And then at the local level, I guess it's been a little bit over a year now. Ann and I would say it was earlier than that, but certainly in this past year, we've said, let's see what we can do to create our space here in the mountains of North Carolina as our loving homestead. And I'm very new to the whole notion of permaculture and things of that nature. But again, as I start to look at how can I live, take each day consistent with the great truths, the fact that we are not just part of nature, we are nature. There is that interconnectedness, that there is sufficient resources when we remember how to share. We are stewards of the earth, not dominators of the earth. So when working from those great truths, and how can I each day bring that to my decision making as to, you know, what to do and what not to do. So that's been my take on it, to make the difference that I can make and to keep in mind as much as possible that I'm doing it not for me, because, I'm fine and I'll probably be fine through the rest of my life. But I am keep looking at my 4-year-old grandson and my 2-year-old granddaughter and doing it for them and their generation and their children as well, when that they have a world that they can enjoy and be a part of. That that's the legacy I want to leave.
Yeah. Yeah, so we really hope that you who's watching us, maybe you can write in and tell us like what are your little tricks and tips to get through this poly crisis? How do you get through eco anxiety? Are you writing? Are you drawing? Are you teaching kids about butterflies? Are you I don't know, what are you doing? Let us know. We'll be really, really happy to share some of your tricks and tips with everybody else too.
Yeah, yeah. And if you know of people that we ought to be interviewing, and kind of bringing into the conversation, I think it's pretty clear. Marla and I don't have the quote the answer, but we are engaged in the questions. And if there are some people that can shed some new light on this, we'd love the opportunity to interview them. So let us hear about who you would love to have us interview and collaborate with as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrap for today.
Yep. So maybe we'll just sum up a little bit about the polycrisis, which is many different crises happening at the same time. So it's not just the climate crisis or the ecological crisis or the plastics crisis or the biodiversity crisis. Are there so many? It's all of them happening at the same time, and then the effects of all that cumulative pain and hurt and suffering all happening in our generation, in our lifetime at the moment. And it's also like, how do we deal with it as human beings, who are very part of natural systems, and we are also part of nature. And me and Brad are working in our little ways to solve the crisis in our spaces. And hopefully these global messages get further and farther away to bring more people into the conversation. So again, calling out to anyone who wants to come talk to us or send us an email about things that you want us to discuss. And if you have tips and tricks of how to handle the poly crisis, let us know too.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Excellent summary.
Cool.
And we shall be back with part two soon.
See ya.